Hello, everyone. I'm Derner Chalabet, Director of Marketing at Blockchain at USC. I'm excited to introduce our next fireside chat featuring two incredible leaders in the blockchain space, Paul Brigner and Marissa Tashman-Koppel. Paul Brigner is a well-respected figure in technology policy and advocacy. He serves on the board of Electric Coin Company, teaches fintech at Georgetown University, and previously led the Coinbase Institute. He is also the founder of Pretty Good Policy, PGP Initiative, which fosters crucial discussions in the crypto policy space through roundtables, briefings, and podcasts. Marissa Tashman-Koppel is a seasoned legal expert in the blockchain regulation. She is currently the head of legal at the Blockchain Association, where she plays a key role in shaping industry policy and legal frameworks for the crypto space. We're grateful to have them with us today. So let's give a warm welcome to Paul Brigner and Marissa Tashman-Koppel.
All right, thank you, Darren, for the introduction. And wow, it's great to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this privacy and legal fireside chat at the USC Van Eck Southern California Blockchain Conference. I'm thrilled to be here with Marissa Koppel, head of legal at Blockchain Association. Before I introduce her, I want to say a couple more things about PGP for crypto, pretty good policy for crypto. Those of you in the room who are technologists, PGP might mean something to you. It's a reference to pretty good privacy, which is a very important cryptography tool. Back in the early days of the internet, it was actually a time referred to as the privacy or crypto wars. And I try to keep that ethos in this PGP initiative, in which we have monthly meetings at the USC Capitol campus in Washington, DC on crypto policy. And the Blockchain Association as a partner is, of course, USC, Van Eck, the VITA Initiative, Coinbase, and my employer, Electric Coin Company. So it's been a pleasure to host those regular monthly meetings. I just want to express my gratitude to USC for allowing that to happen at the Capitol campus. Who knew there was a USC Capitol campus? It's actually beautiful, completely remodeled and just gorgeous. So if you would like to come visit one of those meetings, look us up on Luma, lu.ma, Luma/PGP for crypto, and register. We'd love to have you come. So enough about that. Let's get to the star of this discussion, which is Marissa Koppel. Again, Marissa serves as head of legal at Blockchain Association. She brings a wealth of experience and insight to the table with a distinguished career in law and policy that uniquely positions her to navigate these complex, very complex policy and legal issues and at the intersection of blockchain and regulation. Currently, she's leading the legal efforts at Blockchain Association, I think since 2024. She's been instrumental in advocating for sensible policies that foster innovation in the digital asset space. Before stepping into her current role, she serves as senior counsel and policy counsel at the same organization, the Blockchain Association, where she worked to bridge the gap between emerging technologies and the regulatory landscape. Her experience also includes time as an associate at Covington & Burling LLP, where she tackled high-stakes litigation and investigations, and also as a judicial law clerk at the United States District Court for the Central District of California. Her academic foundation is just as impressive. She's here from LA, actually. I think she's now in San Diego, but she went to law school at Loyola Law School, and then she has a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology with a focus on social justice and social policy from Brandeis University. So with her deep knowledge and experience in the blockchain ecosystem, she's the perfect person to discuss the policy and legal ecosystem in Washington, DC. So Marissa, thank you for being here. Please join me in welcoming Marissa Koppel.
Thanks so much, Paul.
So Marissa, let's start with the discussion about Blockchain Association first. Let's just explain to the audience what the association does and your role there, and all the exciting things you guys are doing for the industry.
Yeah, sure. So Blockchain Association is a nonprofit 501c6 organization. It's a trade association, which means we have members. We have over 100 members who pay annual dues to be part of our association. They're all crypto native, so all of our members are solely focused on building in the crypto blockchain space. So there's many traditional financial companies who are doing things in the space, but all of our members are only focused on crypto. And we essentially are the main advocacy arm for the industry in DC. Mostly we focus on federal policy. We do some state work as well, but mostly federal. We work with all three branches of government, so a lot on the Hill with Congress and with the agencies on the regulatory side, and then also in the courts, which I think we'll talk about this in a bit, but there was a lot of action in the courts over the past 4 years. So that's shifting now, but we have members. Coinbase is a member, you heard from Faryar earlier. And then we have a lot of smaller startup companies that are members that really look to us to provide the intel on what's happening in DC. We have members come to DC and they do a lot of education with policymakers, like members of Congress. We will organize whole days where people will come and explain what they're working on to members of Congress. And yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of fun, and it's definitely changing this year for sure.
Yeah, I'd say it's been an incredible time to be working in crypto policy in DC over the past few months. You've been at it a long time. I've been at it for many years, and there were many years of a great deal of frustration. So I think now we're seeing it's a whole new era in crypto policy that we'll get into. On the BA a little bit more though, I wanted to mention some of the working groups that you guys organize. I'm a member of some of those, the privacy technology one, the self-custody one, I think DeFi as well. How many are there, and explain to those who might be interested in being Blockchain Association members the value proposition, because I actually think that's a very valuable way to engage with policymakers, is to be a part of these working groups that you organize.
Yeah, it's hugely valuable. We have, honestly, it's too many to list them all out. I think we have 22 different working groups. They fall into two categories. One is sector-based, so we have a DPIN working group, we have a self-custody working group, like an institutional working group, a centralized exchange working group, a DeFi working group. So that's really like issue-based, and all of the participants of those working groups are focused on or care about that issue. And then we also have professional qualification-based working groups. So we have a lawyers working group, a compliance professionals working group, cybersecurity working group, and those are really based on like a person's professional qualifications. But our working groups do a ton to lead our advocacy efforts. One of the big things they do is something called fly-ins, which before I had a policy role, I had no idea what a fly-in was. Basically, a group of members will come into town and hit a whole number of congressional offices and do a huge amount of education. So we recently had a DeFi fly-in that was focused on the broker rule, which is a rule that the IRS recently finalized. And I think we have a DPIN fly-in coming up. We are planning a self-custody fly-in, I think. But Paul, I'd love to hear your experience of what it's like to actually be in one of the working groups.
I actually help lead the privacy technology working group, and it's just great to be able to leverage this infrastructure that Blockchain Association has built. And I think that's really what I wanted to explain to everyone, is this is the kind of operation that the crypto industry has in Washington, D.C. And this is what has led to this sea change in the way things are working in DC. And in addition to all of this work that we've described, some of what Faryar, the Chief Policy Officer at Coinbase, described earlier today about the political operation, unprecedented in history of how one industry has come together. So you take all of those things, and it's just a very powerful emerging industry that, from the outside perspective, certainly not from mine or yours or probably many of you in this room, but from the outside perspective, it's come out of nowhere in DC, and it's just completely taken over. So there's these other trade groups and and other industries represented there, and they're all shocked and in awe of what crypto has accomplished.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think we're the most powerful industry in Washington right now.
Yeah, and again, that's why so many of these other groups just stand back in amazement. So with that, let's start to talk about what has changed and like what is all of this activity that we're talking about. Most of you are probably watching it and seeing it. Marissa and I see it on a daily basis, and it's been like drinking from a fire hose recently. Like literally every day, there's a bunch of positive, it's just hard to believe, but positive developments coming out of Washington, D.C. So why don't we just tap on those for a moment, and you can explain like some of the recent things that happened, like the White House Summit and some of the other activities.
Yeah, so I mean, to your point about it being positive and how unprecedented that is, it used to be the opposite, where there was a fire hose of news, but it was all negative. So this is a welcome change. I guess to start, the Trump administration, pretty much as soon as he took office, he issued an executive order that essentially made it clear that he was going to prioritize policy that furthers innovation in the digital asset space. So that was a fairly broad executive order, and then now he's starting to do more narrow ones that further that mission. Just this past Friday, he hosted the first ever White House crypto roundtable that gathered about 20 CEOs from some of the major crypto companies, and they had a discussion about various policy priorities. We likely will see an executive order probably this week focused on debanking, and I think more will follow. So it's definitely an exciting time coming from the administration, but then also there's a lot happening on the regulatory side with the agencies, and then also in Congress as well. I mean, even right now, they're working through stablecoin legislation. One of the bills, the Senate bill, goes to a markup tomorrow, which means that the Senate committee gets to propose changes and amendments before the bill goes to the floor for a vote. So it's only March 11th, I think. And the change has only existed for about a month and a half, and we're already seeing so much happen.
Right, and that legislation, as well as what's referred to as market structure legislation, the president has asked that those be delivered to him by August, right? And Faryar talked about this and described those two legislative initiatives earlier. I think he did a really good job of explaining that it's kind of like a no-brainer for these things to have been done, but they haven't been done yet. They're going to be just a huge unlock for the industry. Both of them are so significant in helping clarify the regulatory roles of different agencies, as well as ensuring that stablecoins can be used in a way that benefits everyone and play a major role in our financial ecosystem. So just incredibly exciting. It just feels like we're at the beginning of very, very long-term transition that we've been hoping for. Yeah, and it's also important to note that these legislative initiatives are so key because that's going to last years and years. It's not an executive order which could be quickly changed if any administration changes.
Or even an agency action could be quickly changed.
Well, let's transition to that topic, because I know a lot of your focus is on the SEC and a litigation that has emerged from the SEC. You mentioned that some of that has changed or maybe going away and transitioning to a different approach. So describe that, and maybe even start with what it was like before and all that built up and all of it was like that has changed recently, like all these things that have disappeared so quickly. Sure.
So I guess just to step back, my role at Blockchain Association, I handle everything on the regulatory side, so with the agencies, and then also anything in the courts. And my colleague, Sarah Milby, she's our head of policy, and she handles everything on the legislative side, so basically everything in Congress. And I guess to step back even further, the way that regulation typically works with agencies is an agency will propose a rule or propose a regulation, and then there's a process under the Administrative Procedure Act called, it's like through notice and comment. So when the agency proposes a rule, then the public and public stakeholders get to comment on that rule and explain like why it's good or why it's bad and what changes they want to see made. And what was happening under Gensler is that Chair Gensler, who is the chair of the SEC in the Biden administration, he essentially did not go through this notice and comment procedure and decided what he wanted the rules to be as applied to cryptocurrency, and then he would file enforcement actions against a lot of different crypto companies, which you guys probably have heard about. And it really hurt the industry because the industry did not know where the SEC was going to go next. So basically what would happen is people in the industry would read these enforcement actions and try to read between the lines on like what the SEC was thinking and how they thought the securities laws applied to the technology they were building. And it was a very challenging process because there were no clear regulations to go off of. And what ended up happening was a lot of builders decided not to build in the US at all and to go offshore, so they wouldn't have to deal with this lack of regulatory clarity. So now, Chair Gensler is not the chair of the SEC anymore. We're expecting Chair Atkins to be confirmed, although he hasn't been confirmed by the Senate yet. But the Commissioner Uyeda is currently the acting chair, and then another commissioner, Hester Peirce, is leading the SEC's crypto initiatives. So they've taken the complete opposite approach, where they recognize that there is a lot of lack of clarity and that the industry wants regulation that makes sense and is tailored toward what the industry is building. So most recently, they've put out a request for information, so essentially a call to the industry for the industry to give the SEC a bunch of different information and their thoughts on how various aspects of the technology should be regulated. So the approach has completely shifted. And under Chair Gensler, the industry reacted to that approach by basically suing the SEC was the reaction, because there was no clarity and it was really hard for people in the industry to build products. So they went to the SEC, sued the SEC, and asked, this is what I'm trying to build, and court judge, will you like force the SEC to tell me that this is okay or that it's not okay? So those lawsuits are still ongoing, but in terms of the enforcement actions that the SEC brought, a lot of them have been dismissed because of the SEC's changed approach, where the SEC has actually affirmatively dismissed cases. They dismissed the Coinbase case, which was very exciting, and a number of others too.
Yeah, there's a lot really to discuss there on that point of the SEC asking the industry to come in and talk. There's kind of an inside joke within the crypto policy arena about coming in to talk to the SEC, because this is what the prior administration and Chair Gensler and they had asked for the industry to come in and talk. But what would happen in some situations, and maybe all situations, I'm not sure, it seemed like it, that if you did go in and talk, the next thing you would do would be you would get investigated, and based on the information that you had shared. So it's just incredible to think that now the industry can go in and talk to the regulator and have these productive conversations. And I've talked to some of these regulators myself, and they actually do want to understand what the new business models are, how crypto is being used in different ways, so they can work through it with the industry and help the industry come to something that's workable. As also, you were talking about the Administrative Procedure Act and the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking process and how that all is supposed to work. In a prior life, I was working, and this is before crypto, I was working in telecom. And was at Verizon, and we would follow this NPRM, this Administrative Procedure Act process so closely, and this was how policy was developed through that agency and how the rules were developed over time. And the rules would come out, and if you didn't like them, and if you had legal justification, you could go sue. But in this situation, there were no rules to sue on, right? So the lawsuits that you're describing are quite unusual.
Right.
Like, it's not like you can say, there's this rule, we don't like it, and we think you didn't follow, the APA, the Administrative Procedure Act, for one reason or another. It was like, we just don't know what to do, we're gonna sue you.
Yeah, and it's, just to give an example, Blockchain Association filed a lawsuit against the SEC last year that was in response to a finalized rule. So the SEC finalized a rule that changed the definition of a dealer under the securities laws. And we submitted comments, as did a number of others in the industry, and the SEC finalized the rule and did not take into account the comments that the industry submitted. And we filed a lawsuit, which was within our right under the APA. We won, the rule is vacated, so that rule is no longer a rule. And it just demonstrates the importance of this process.
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to work.
Right. And the way that Chair Gensler's approach worked was there was no process by which the public could essentially disagree with how the agency was regulating. And the only way to do it was if you were sued by the agency. So if the agency filed an enforcement action against you, only then could you speak up and defend yourself. But that's no position, like no entrepreneur wants to be in that position.
Well, right, and if you weren't being sued, you were likely being investigated. Almost any high-profile cryptocurrency project received different orders of investigation where you would have to deliver lots of information to the SEC. You didn't know where that was headed, if it was going to go to a lawsuit or not. And it cost many small organizations, including the one that I work for, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, Blockchain Association actually put together some data on how much money our members were spending defending against the SEC, so basically paying lawyers, which I don't mean to disparage my profession, but their lawyers charge crazy fees. And I think it was definitely in the hundreds of millions of dollars that were going to legal fees, which is just like totally absurd, and money that could be spent building, building products that people actually want to use. So it's wasting taxpayer dollars, like on the flip side of the SEC, is funded by all of our taxes.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the positive things, or let's start to move in that direction. There's still, however, a few things out there that I think have not been dismissed that you're still concerned about, and I think we should just list those real quick so everybody knows what's still out there that we need to keep on our radar of high concern.
Yeah, I think the highest concern item is coming out of the DOJ, and it's really hurts developers. The Tornado Cash developer prosecution, and then the prosecution of the Samurai Wallet developers. So I know you've been closely following those as well, but both of those developers are developers of privacy protocols, and essentially it is akin to prosecuting the gun manufacturer for a murder, where their gun was used in the murder. So this is major, it stifles innovation in a major way, and there's a lot of fear among developers because it's not just a civil suit. These are real, you go to jail. It's criminal, it's like a criminal case. So it's a huge consequences, and it's in the privacy space, which is tough because there's a national security element. In the Tornado Cash case, North Korea was basically laundering money, or allegedly laundering money, through the Tornado Cash protocol. And nobody wants that. Like, I certainly don't want that. But whether we go after the developers of the software that they were using to launder their money is a whole other question. So I would love to hear your thoughts on it. But the trial is in April of Storm, who's the developer, one of the developers of Tornado Cash. So we're definitely keeping an eye on that. And the way that the DOJ has their thoughts as to the way the law applies to this technology is unprecedented, in a similar way to how the SEC did not do any rulemaking and they just filed an enforcement action. The DOJ is doing something similar here with the money transmitter laws, but the consequences are much bigger because it's criminal and you could go to jail.
Yeah, no, it's hugely important. And for those who want to dig into this a little more deeply, there's a really nice video that was filmed at USC Capitol campus at one of the recent PGP meetings. We had Peter Van Valkenburg and a couple other people talking about this case. And this is, I think, technically referred to as Section 1960, right? And so you might see that listed. But I encourage you to watch that video if you're interested. This has huge implications for the ability to write code. And I'm very thankful for BA as well as Coin Center, that's Peter's organization, that is fighting this. So it's not all bad news on that front, however, though, because there was the situation with OFAC, that's the Office of Foreign Assets Control, where these contracts for Tornado Cash were sanctioned. Now, that is in the process of being resolved, right? Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so you mentioned Coin Center's case. They sued OFAC, and then there was another lawsuit against OFAC, and the Fifth Circuit basically reversed what OFAC did by putting the software on the sanctions list. So normally, only persons or property can be on the sanctions list. And when something is on this list, basically nobody in the United States, no business, no person can interact with whoever is on this list. So when you sign up for a bank account, you have to give your, obviously your name and your social security number and your address and all of these things that then the bank takes and does a whole process called KYC, where they verify that you're not a terrorist or a criminal or trying to use their system to launder money. So if your name or any of your information is on the sanctions list, the bank will then block you and you won't be able to open up an account. And that happens even when you sign up for a Coinbase, which is a centralized exchange. You have to, I think you do a picture of your driver's license. So if you're on this list, you can't transact with anyone in the US. But this list is limited to people or property. Now, a smart contract that is open source, it's essentially like an address on the Ethereum blockchain, and nobody owns it. It lives out, on the blockchain forever. You can't change it. It's not a person, obviously, and OFAC put this address on the sanctions list. So why is that problematic is that somebody can interact with that address, and that address could send a US person money without the US person giving permission for the address to send them money. So if that happens, you'd be committing a crime by interacting with this sanctioned address. That's why it's a problem practically speaking, but in terms of the legal reason, it's not a person or property. So there were two lawsuits that basically made this argument that OFAC has no authority to sanction these smart contract addresses. And they won, at least in the Fifth Circuit, they won. So now it's going through the process, I guess, of getting those addresses taken off of the sanctions list. And that's a different issue than the criminal 1960 issue that we just talked about before.
Right. It's a different issue, but it's still,
Right.
this issue of being able to write code and deploy code as a developer without facing legal
Totally.
issues. Yeah.
And of like a user being able to interact with open source protocols without facing legal issues.
Exactly. So, okay, so that's the top issue. Are there any other little things out there that we should keep on our list of like watching out for that are remaining that you're tracking closely?
I mean, Blockchain Association is still in active litigation against the IRS right now. We sued the IRS on the same day that they finalized the rule, the broker rule as it pertains to DeFi. So that rule essentially would require a DeFi front end, so like a Uniswap front end, even if they don't take custody of your assets, to furnish 1099s, which would mean that Uniswap Labs would have to collect all of this information about their customers and somehow find information or collect information about the counterparty to their customers, which is impossible to do. And also it would mean that a wallet that has the ability of like trading within the wallet, that essentially like an API where a person who has that wallet can trade within the wallet, they would also have to furnish 1099s, which is even more problematic because the wallet software developer doesn't have any insight into these transactions. So we filed a lawsuit in December, the same day that the rule was finalized, and the IRS is due to respond, I think at the beginning of April. But at the same time, this rule is going through kind of an odd process in Congress called the Congressional Review Act. And essentially, it allows a new Congress the ability to reverse rules that were made under the prior administration. So there was this rule is, I'm hoping, and I think it will be taken off of the table as a rule, be like repealed if this CRA bill gets passed. So I'm not sure what the next step is on that, but I know it passed the Senate and now it goes to the House, but I'm not sure when the actual vote will be.
I believe very soon. I mean, could it be even as soon as this week?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really great news because it's hard to overemphasize how big of an issue this is, because if all of DeFi, every DeFi protocol had to collect this information and all these front ends had to collect this information, it would essentially completely make DeFi unusable, or it defeats the purpose of it. It would just not be DeFi anymore. Yeah. Everything would be intermediated on a blockchain.
And you imagine a new developer of a DeFi protocol that's like a small startup, and I don't want to give that small startup my social security number. Like, they don't have the operational security to handle all of this sensitive customer data. So it's definitely problematic, and I think it would shut down a lot of the development of this software in the US.
Right. Well, let's hope that CRA goes through as expected. I think it is expected to pass.
And if it doesn't, our lawsuit is going to still be active.
There you go. So we're not out of the woods yet, but I think things in general are really shaping up quite well. So I think we're on a path, and especially if these criminal issues get addressed, and if hopefully if DOJ would pull those or dismiss those cases, that would be unbelievable. But we'll see. Wow, okay, so we have covered a ton of information here, and I hope we haven't put you all to sleep post-lunch, but this is what legal lawyers do in DC, and it's actually very exciting to us, believe it or not. So let's talk a little bit more about, or switch a little bit up our discussion to the students in the room, because there's probably a number of them, and give them some insights on maybe how to get into this industry, if in particular, if it's a policy and legal interest they have, maybe you'd want to give them some insights and advice. Because as at the trade association, you probably see a lot of opportunities for that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is an easy one, but we have a jobs board. I think it's the blockchainassociation.org/jobs, I think, where I think we have over 1,200 jobs posted on there. So our member companies can post jobs with, the company on this jobs board. So if you are looking for a job after graduation, like that's definitely one place to go. I think that the industry is very unique in that because it's so new, it's open and very welcoming to new people that want to join. So I got into the industry when I was in private practice. I worked on an SEC investigation of a crypto company, and I thought it was very interesting, but I definitely was not working on crypto matters full time. And then when I figured out I didn't want to be a partner at a firm, I was trying to figure out what industry to go into, and the crypto industry seemed most exciting. So I joined the industry full-time in 2022, and it was just so welcoming, and people are very open to answering questions, and we just want more people to join. So I think there's a unique opportunity as opposed to joining like a very old industry, that you can really build a name for yourself and build an expertise in this industry, because there frankly aren't that many people in it. So it's a small community.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And hearing some of the other people on stage today talking about all the exciting things they're doing, I think from a student's perspective, that has to be very exciting. And if you are interested in the law and policy side of things, there's actually, I think, a lot of opportunity for that as well. Because in addition to just the Blockchain Association, which does have interns, there's a number of other groups in DC that work on law and policy, such as DeFi Education Fund, Crypto Council for Innovation, the Digital Chamber, the Bitcoin Policy Institute. I could go on. And this is, it's really a great thing to have so many of these different entities that are out there working on their own little issues and in their own way. They're all different for this industry. I think it just reflects a maturity that hopefully has come across in this discussion to let you all know that we're killing it in DC.
There's also an organization called SheFi, like DeFi, but SheFi, that aims to educate women, to bring more women into the space. So if you are a woman and are interested in joining the space, it's like a cohort-based model where you are part of a cohort, and then there's like a whole education plan to just teach you the very basics of what you can do and how you can build your own like wealth using crypto.
Nice.